I am a huge fan of Mobile Suit Gundam. I mean, it was kind of my intro to anime, along with Shining Force. I love Gundam so much that I make a point to try and cover a Gundam game every single year, and I just realized, I didn't do that at all last year. And I'm not okay with that. But considering the last one I talked about, yeah, maybe I need to take a break because, oh boy, that was bad. Fortunately, while the majority of the series is still Japanese exclusive, and the earlier iterations of games in the series we did get in English are still exceedingly hard to find, they have been making strides to release more and more internationally. So we actually have quite a few games we could potentially talk about that were released in English. And that's great, but there is a problem. Crap that besmirches the most absolutely beautiful thing Gundam has ever done. Cynically motivated gacha game. Crap. Played the demo to that was crap. Nope! Already talked about that one, and dear lord, that is probably the second most cynically motivated product I've ever had to talk about on this channel, next to Elemental Knights R. Terrible single-player game based on an online-only game that didn't have proper AI, didn't work properly, and was designed to onboard you onto a gacha experience? No, thank you. Never again. Dear lord, that's painful. Oh yeah, and that thing. That didn't even last a whole year. That was a terrible live service, and I'm glad it's dead. Hooray! So I guess we're going back to the mines of importing. So, to the PS3! Now fortunately, I do have almost every Gundam game on the PS3 as well, but I've also talked about most of them. So I could do Gundam Unicorn, the game based on the first third of one of the most dubiously canon chunks of Gundam ever. But last time I talked about a mech game by From Software, their fans descended on my channel and it was grim, and I still get a lot of negative comments about that. For a game I liked, mind you, From Software's fans are nuts. So, going with 0081. Yeah. Now, the story to UC 0081 takes place, if that title didn't tell you everything, in the year 0081. 2 years after the One-Year War, and 2 years before Operation Stardust, so we don't have to deal with Koaraki and his bizarre fear of carrots being some kind of personality trait. I take that as a positive. The remnants of the Principality of Zeon continue to resist the Federation, and the Federation is basically trying to put them down and restore order to how things were before this whole them fighting for their own independence and being properly supported by people who understand the plight of space noids was a thing. Or whatever the hell the zombies twisted that into anyway. On the Federation side, we have a sweeper group designed to go after the ghosts of Zeon. This group, named Phantom Sweeper. And on the Remnant side, we have said ghost group, known as the Invisible Knights. Their naming conventions weren't the most creative in this title, I'll admit. But basically, the Federation's just fighting the Zeons. I mean, it's in Japanese, I'm working with what I've got here. What's really interesting, though, is that the two stories are inextricably connected. I mean, you're not just hunting down the remnants of Zeons or, fighting for what your principality did ultimately stand for. These two are opposing forces, and sure, one is designed to wipe out the other, and the other is just fighting for their own rights. But the fact is that these two individual groups end up getting tangled together frequently over the course of the game. And because both are player character groups, you end up seeing the war from both sides, and I like that a lot. It gives it more of a grounded, all-rounded storytelling vibe as opposed to just hearing about one side of the war the entire time, which almost feels kind of propagandistic in a way. Very early on the Federation side, you are defending Odessa Base. About halfway through, a suit that you had captured happens to get captured back, and you have to fight it. And on the flippity-flop, if you're playing on the side of the Invisible Knights, you actually take part in that recovery operation. And it's pretty great, because on the Federation side, when you're fighting that particular suit, the amazing Ifrit Noct, substantially better than the terrible Ifrit Jaeger, which yes, I'm still angry about, it absolutely wrecks shop. During that stage, I had to basically hide behind everything and just take potshots at it, hoping it would eventually die, whereas you play as the Zeon Remnants, you end up piloting that and completely cutting through everything like a hot knife through butter, or a frozen katana through mobile suits that basically feel like they're made of butter. It's cool to see that these two sides do have connected missions and that you can play from the opposite sides' perspectives. What's also really nice about the setting to this game, if you're a mechanics nut for Gundam like I am, is that it utilizes suits that previously didn't exist in canon or only existed in the realm of the mobile suit variation line. For the Federation, you end up getting to play as the G-Lines, which are these really cool suits that, as far as I can tell, are pretty much exclusive to this game, but they're kind of like modularly designed super gyms, and that's really quite cool, as well as the 7th Gundam, as well as its upgrade, the full armor 7th Gundam, which gets used for one very weird level. I'll talk about that later. And on the Xeon side, you don't get that much in terms of experimental units, but you do get the Ifrit Noct. And it's a great power fantasy to get this, like, in the 2nd level, only to have it taken away later. You know, it's great to have this incredibly OP suit very, very early on, and just stomp around destroying everything. And considering how limited the Ifrits actually got, once again, there's only canonically 8, it's a really cool suit. It is a Spec Ops kind of suit that uses super cooled weapons so it won't be picked up on thermal sensors. That's brilliant! And it's not a terrible waste of an Ifrit like the Jaeger. God, Code Fairy might be like the 2nd worst game I've ever had to talk about, and it still bugs me today. Don't play Code Fairy, play this, it's good. There's some pretty interesting character building moments as well, and plot twists that happen over the course of the game. I'm hardly fluent in Japanese, but I managed to pick up that there was one character that seemed to have connections to both groups and had to fight through that, and it was interesting to see that happen and see where that went. Overall, I think the story to this game is pretty good, even though, again, I'm hardly fluent and just sort of had to infer based on what I noticed in this. Still, pretty good. The gameplay to 0081 is a third-person shooter squad-based game. You start each level by going to your hangar and outfitting your team. You get to select your pilots, because over the course of the playthrough you might get additional pilots to select your team. You get to select their suits, as well as the individual weapons and power-ups that each suit is equipped with. I really like this because you do get a sense of full control as to what you're outfitted with in regards to how to handle every single encounter. And all the menus are in English, which is really, really nice to sort of better understand what you're doing. There is one big issue here that I found, though, and that is, while this game does allow you to select your group's equipment and their suits, frequently they will wrestle away control in regards to what you get to pilot, even though you can select your own suit. And I'm honestly not sure if this is just because they didn't want to create every single cutscene using every single suit combination, or that they were just slavishly devoted to the canon of, well, we don't want an atmosphere suit to be fighting in space. Even though the 8th MS team in universe radio drama exists that took the 8th MS team in their ground Gundams and took them into space, and had 2 different variations of the Easy 8 that were space usable for some reason. In canon fan fiction is weird, or when MS Igloo did it with the atmosphere only Zaku 2s that went to space, even though they weren't equipped with half as many verniers or stabilizers as necessary to properly situate yourself in a gravityless environment. What I'm trying to say is it really sucks that the game gives you the illusion of choice as to what you can use. You don't actually have half as much control over the plot in regards to the suits you get to equip yourself. That, and I know way too much about the more obscure corners of Gundam. Once you actually get into a level, you take your squad out into various different missions. The vast majority of them primarily are just destroy all enemies, although there are a couple destroy certain targets or destroy things within a specific time frame, and there's even a few defensive missions, including one that was unbelievably frustrating and I died probably 24 times on. I care not for that mission. But there's a wide variety of missions that you get plopped into, at which point you have to go hunt down the enemy, and you can issue individual commands to your teammates using the directional pad and the L2 button, I believe. Commands such as spread out behind me, focus on my target, go refuel. There's several different things you can order your teammates to do, but the AI in general, both for your allies and enemies, is a bit naff. At one point, I was once again fighting the Ifrit Noct, and again, that thing is an absolute beast, so I made a point to stay as far away from it as possible, and I might have gotten a little bit over the map, or at least where the map expected me to be, and it just sat there and stared at me while I shot it in the face and it died. Yeah, the AI just seems to primarily try and take the shortest route towards you and attack as aggressively as possible, and that's about all you've got in terms of opponents and AI in general, which, to be fair, still makes it smarter than Code Fairy's non-existent AI, but it doesn't mean they're particularly smart. It's very easy to outwit them. Like I said, the first time I ran into the Ifrit Noct, that thing will absolutely destroy you in about 2 hits, so I spent the entire level just running away from it, taking pot shots at it. But the AI spent the entire time just mindlessly chasing after me, not really doing all that much. Just run straight at me as aggressively as possible, and that was his entire playbook. That's just sort of how I had to win that fight, because it was very, very much not in my favor to actually properly fight that thing head on. That said, that does lead me to one of the things that impressed me the most about this game, and that is that they really got a sense of feel for the suits, like in terms of relative power levels. In the very first level, as the Federation, you start off with a couple of gym commands, fighting some Zaku 1s, and you're basically taking them out in 2 shots. It's not that big a deal. Then you run into the Zaku 2s, the upgrades to the Zaku 1s, and suddenly it's more like you're fighting on even ground, but you're still taking them out pretty easily. And then the Ifrit shows up and just completely destroys you. And it feels like you are just unbelievably underpowered, and it's genuinely quite scary to fight this guy. Again, when you play as him, it's unbelievably satisfying to just absolutely destroy everything instantly. It's great. And eventually you get more and more upgraded suits, and you feel that level of increase in power in relativity to everything around you, as you are front and center of this arms race. It is absolutely satisfying to get a new suit because you get to feel that increase in power, and it does feel like they really understood the level of power certain suits had in relativity to one another. That just makes it feel very true to what each and every one of these suits were in the timeline and power scale and relativity to one another, and it just feels very real for that, you know? It feels so much better to finally get into that G line, because running around as a gym command sucked for so long. Getting to pilot the Ifrit was an absolute godsend, because the Zaku 1 that you were piloting before was just a piece of crap. Likewise, the understanding of how each weapon feels in relativity to one another can be felt in this game as, again, mostly using the perspective of the Federation here, but you start off with like a little bullpup submachine gun, and it has a lot of ammo and it fires very, very fast, but it doesn't do a lot of damage, and it's pretty inaccurate. But eventually you'll move up the tech tree and you'll get what is effectively like the Blue Destiny 3's beam rifle. It has substantially less ammo, but you can also charge it to do more damage. But because you have less ammo, if the enemy manages to block or deflect that shot, yeah, you're in a substantially worse place because you've just used a huger chunk of your ammo pool. Each and every weapon does feel a little bit different, and it does feel like you kind of have to get used to it to find the build and loadout that works well for you. And that can be exciting and fun. Now, if there is one thing about the campaign I really don't like, for whatever reason, if you play the Federation campaign, one of the 13 levels is just completely different from the rest. This game is ostensibly a third-person sort of squad-based, vaguely tactics-y shooter. And then for one level, it decides to take inspiration from Gundam Hot Scramble or Encounters in Space and just make one level a really wonky rail shooter that doesn't feel well thought out or executed upon. It comes out of nowhere and plays like nothing else in this game, and I swear it's only there just so that you can play as the full armor 7th, and then you've got an excuse for the next level to play in the regular 7th. I don't know, that comes out of nowhere and it doesn't make a lot of sense, nor does it feel very good to play. But the only other issues I have in terms of gameplay for this are really more on the technical level. Like, it doesn't play at a super great frame rate, and there's weird amounts of loading in this game. Like, when you finish a level, be it either through victory or defeat, when the level finishes, you then get loading to show a small cutscene of a zoom in on your mobile suit, and then a victory screen, and then more loading to actually let you into the results screen so that you can actually continue to go on to the next level. Some of this loading is so bad that when you go into the technical briefings before you even get to the start of a level, which unfortunately, unlike all the menus and stuff, aren't in English or anything, they're vocalized and everything, and you can press a button to skip it. It doesn't actually skip it, it just accelerates the next line of dialogue. But even when you're done all that, and even if you're allowing us to not get skipped and it's running in its regular speed, even once that briefing is done, you're still waiting about 30 seconds before the game says, okay, loading's done, now you can start the level. And even after all that, the game asks you to actively confirm that you understand loading is done before the game will actually advance. So you're sitting here on basically a silent blank screen, just waiting. And then you have to say that, oh, I understand that loading's done. I wasn't zoning out because I've been sitting here staring at a screen doing nothing. This is such a bad use of time. The damage in this game can also be really, really huge. I remember I was playing one specific level, I think it was the defense mission, and the first enemy I ran into reduced my health from 100% to 7% in about 10 seconds of starting the level. That can get really, really grim. Fortunately, you can reload your ammo as well as refill up to 50% of your health, provided there's a support truck nearby. But if you try and go and get that refill, you have to idle your machine for about 30 seconds. And that's scary. Like, genuinely, that is some of the most tense moments in this game, is just knowing I have to park myself here for half a minute and just hope that all the enemies I actively see on the radar aren't going to shoot me while they're slowly closing in on me, or don't destroy the target I'm supposed to be protecting because I need more ammo. Genuinely, that's very, very stressful. But here's the interesting thing about this. The tactics ordering, the sitting around waiting for refills, all of these things, even the basic mechanics of these, would all later go on to effectively be used in the battle operation games, and later, eventually, Code Fairy. And it's weird to see that because those games are awful cynical cash-ins used to cynically motivate people to buy gacha to buy power. They weren't designed to be good games first, whereas this actually uses pretty much everything all those games use in a horrible way to actually make a fun, well-paced single-player experience. Basically, this game is effectively Code Fairy if Code Fairy was a competently made game that wasn't designed to onboard people to a really bad gacha market. Either way, 0081 is a bit clunky, a bit clumsy, but it is a relatively fun game to play. It's certainly not my favorite Gundam game on the PS3 in terms of gameplay, but it works really, really well, and for the most part, it's entirely playable even if you don't understand the language. There's even a full-blown mission mode as well as mercenaries mode, which allows you to mix Xeon suits with Federation suits, which is pretty cool. This game does a lot, and it's very, very good for it. The overall presentation to UC 0081 is very, very good. For the time, I think the 3D models actually look really great, and there's tons of little bits of detail that really struck me when I played this. Like, I noticed on my gym while I was running around that my back armor skirting just under where my thrusters on my backpack were, there's actually like some heat warping there. Like, you can kind of see burn marks from where your thrusters would have actually burnt the paint. These models have a lot of detail in it, and it's very clear that people worked very, very hard on them. And there's some remarkable compositing here with the 2D animation on top of the 3D. Some of it looks a little bit ropey, some of like the Vulcan firing off effects look a little bad, but for the most part, the compositing and the 2D and 3D all look great. The sound design is likewise very, very good, but I did notice one thing while playing this. It sounds great, there's just a metric crap ton of repetition here. That said, what you do get is pretty solid, and the total presentation to UC 0081 is fantastic. And I mean, if nothing else, there was a lot more effort put into this game than Code Fairy. It didn't go out of its way to steal a bunch of footage from previous games and make a filter over top of it to make it look worse. So, 2 generations earlier, this game is still better than Code Fairy. Now, if you want a copy of Mobile Suit Gundam 0081 on the PS3, cheapest copy I see on eBay right now is $18, and that is absolutely worth it. I'm not going to say this is my favorite Gundam game of all time. I'm not going to say it's my favorite Gundam import of all time. I'm not even going to say it's my favorite PS3 Gundam import of all time, because Gundam Breaker 2 is genuinely one of the greatest things this series has ever seen. But it is an excellent game, and if you're looking for a fun PS3 import or a really solid Gundam game, this one is really easy to import, really easy to get into, even if you don't understand the language, and it's just a really fun time that understands the strengths and weaknesses of every suit and how they should feel in relativity to one another. This game very much cares for what Mobile Suit Gundam is and was to its fans, and it feels like it was made for fans, or at the very least was made with care instead of it just being a product. Not like all of those other games I showed at the start of this, but especially the Battle Operations games, and especially Code Fairy, which I'm not sure if I've made it clear up to this point, I'm still angry about, because that is one of the most unbelievably cynical things I've ever had to play. The fact is, at least at one point, the people in charge of Bandai Namco Games cared about what they did. And they cared about making good Gundam games, just as the people at Bandai who actually made the model kits cared about what they did, instead of just making everything premium Bandai and ridiculously expensive and low quantity so no one got to have anything they actually wanted. And yes, I am still bitter that every version of the Pale Rider is a limited edition product, and that they're still making more Pale Riders thanks to Battle Operations, even though the Pale Rider was, as I understood it, a one-of-a-kind suit, because that's just where this incredibly cynical cash grab sort of has evolved from. And it's sad, because if you look at Code Fairy, if you look at the Battle Operations games, you know, a lot of those mechanics came from this game, except here it works, because they were ultimately designed for it to be a game before it being a thing to market microtransactions to people, to make them feel more powerful than the people they were fighting online. I love Mobile Suit Gundam, it's one of my favorite things of all time, and it just absolutely sickens me how cynical the marketing and selling of products with this brand has become. You know, I loved building those model kits, but now every model kit I want is premium, and you have to order it from Japan off a third-party seller who's going to jack up the price because they just don't make regular kits anymore. I hate that every single game seems to be a live service or something with incredible microtransactions that isn't designed to actually be a good game. Or in the case of Code Fairy, something even worse, something designed as a single-player experience, full price, that's just supposed to onboard you to those microtransactions, which is the most sickening thing ever. I don't know about the future of Gundam or its games, but at the very least, ones on the PS3 are pretty good. 何が来ようとも負けるわけにはいきません。